"We need your garage for our new home gym." That's what he said. My son, Mark, he said it over Sunday dinner, right after his wife, Jessica, had finished explaining the benefits of something called high-intensity interval training. He didn't ask. He stated it as a fact, a logistical detail already settled in his mind. He passed the gravy as he said it, his eyes on the mashed potatoes, not on me, as if he were discussing the weather, as if the garage were just an empty box waiting for him to fill it with his new, expensive toys. I didn't say anything. I just held the porcelain gravy boat, its weight familiar in my hand. The warmth of it seeped into my skin. I watched a small drip of brown slide down its spout and land silently on the white linen tablecloth my wife, Eleanor, had loved so much. A tiny, perfect stain. Jessica smiled, a bright, rehearsed thing. "It'll be great, Arthur. We'll be over more often. You'll see more of us." The logic of it was a slap. "You'll see more of us if you give us what we want." The transaction was clear. My space for their time. I looked around the dining room. The same mahogany table I'd eaten at for 50 years. The same chairs. The grandfather clock in the corner, a gift from my own father, ticking off the seconds of my life with a steady, solemn rhythm. Tick, tock. Each sound a small grain of sand falling through the hourglass. My garage wasn't an empty box. It was a sanctuary. It was a museum. It was my life's work, outside of the life I'd built with Eleanor. Inside it, under custom-fitted canvas covers, slept my girls. The 57 Bel Air, cherry red, the one I'd bought just after getting back from the service. I'd spent 3 years restoring her, bolt by bolt. I remembered the smell of the upholstery, the day the new leather went in. It smelled like victory. The '69 Mustang, Highland Green, Eleanor's favorite. We'd taken on a trip down the coast of California one year, the salt air in her hair, the radio playing something by the Mamas and the Papas. Her laughter was still trapped in the glove box, I was sure of it, and the '48 Ford F1 pickup, the truck I learned to drive in. My dad's truck. The engine still turned over with a grumble that sounded like his voice on a cold morning. They were not just cars. They were time machines. Each one held a piece of my soul, a piece of my history, a piece of Eleanor. Mark knew this. He'd grown up in that garage, handing me wrenches, learning the names of tools he no longer remembered. He'd helped me wax the Bel Air for his first prom. He'd sat in the passenger seat of the Mustang on the day I drove him to college, his face a mixture of excitement and fear. But the man passing the gravy had forgotten the boy with grease on his hands. "The cars are just collecting dust, Dad," he continued, finally looking at me. His expression was one of patient reasonableness, the kind you use on a child who doesn't understand what's good for him. "It's not practical. You don't even drive them anymore." It was true. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The clutch on the Mustang was getting harder for my knee to manage. But practicality wasn't the point. It was never the point. You don't stop loving something just because it's no longer useful to you. I took a slow sip of water. The glass felt cold against my lips. I set it down carefully on the coaster. I looked at my son, at his soft hands and his expensive watch. I looked at my daughter-in-law with her bright, empty smile. They saw an old man. They saw a big house. They saw unused space, an asset to be leveraged. They didn't see me. They hadn't for a long time. This was just the latest in a long, quiet line of erasures. There was the time they sold my old fishing boat without asking, claiming it was a safety hazard on the property. They'd given me a framed picture of it as a consolation. There was this surprise 70th birthday party they threw, a loud, catered affair at their house filled with their friends, where I felt like a guest of honor at my own funeral. They played music I didn't know and served food I couldn't eat. There was the constant gentle pressure to downsize, to sell the house I'd built with my own 2 hands and move into a community, a place with organized activities and nurses on call, a place where I could be filed away, managed. Each time, I had yielded. I had accommodated. For the sake of peace. For the sake of family. Because I thought that's what a father did. You give. You provide. You make way for the next generation. But the garage was different. The garage was the last piece of ground that was truly mine. I looked at the stain on the tablecloth. It had started to set. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Mark smiled, satisfied. He thought he had one. For him, "I'll think about it," was just a polite, old-fashioned way of saying yes. A brief, final pause before the inevitable surrender. He went back to his potatoes. The conversation moved on to their vacation plans. The ticking of the clock seemed to get louder. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my old leather armchair in the living room, the one with the permanent impression of my body worn into its cushions. The house was silent around me. Every tick of the clock was a question. What is a man if he has no ground to stand on? I thought of my father. He'd lived through the Depression. He never owned much, but what he had was his. His tools, his small garden, his dignity. He used to say, "Arthur, never let a man tell you who you are in your own home." I had let them. I had let their convenience define my life. Their needs had become my purpose. I was the caretaker of the house they would one day inherit. I was the keeper of assets they were already mentally spending. I was a ghost in my own life story. Around 2 a.m, I stood up. My joints creaked in protest. I walked to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. Strong and black, the way I've always liked it. The smell filled the quiet house. It was a real smell, a solid smell. I poured a cup and carried it out to the garage. I unlocked the side door. The air inside was cool and still, thick with the scent of old leather, motor oil, and polish. It smelled like history. It smelled like me. I flipped a switch, and the long fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, humming a familiar tune. There they were, my girls. Even under the canvas, their shapes were beautiful, full of promise and memory. I walked over to the Bel Air and pulled back a corner of the cover. The red paint gleamed, deep and flawless. I ran my hand over the fender. The metal was cool and smooth, like a promise kept. I remember the day I bought her. I was just a kid back from overseas, with more ghosts in my head than dollars in my pocket. Seeing her on that used car lot, it felt like seeing the future. A bright, shiny, American future. It was something to build on. I walked to the Mustang. I pulled back her cover. Eleanor had called it our getaway car. On days when the world felt heavy, we'd just get in and drive. No destination, just the road and the wind and the two of us. After she was gone, I'd sit in the driver's seat sometimes just to feel her presence beside me. Finally, the old Ford. I didn't have to pull his cover. I knew every dent, every scratch by heart. That dent on the passenger door was from me, age 16, misjudging the distance to the barn wall. My father hadn't yelled. He just handed me a hammer and showed me how to knock it out. A man fixes his own mistakes, son, a home gym. They wanted to put a treadmill where the Mustang slept. A rack of weights where my father's truck rested. I sipped my coffee. It was bitter, but cleared my head. The hurt from dinner was gone. It had burned away, leaving something else in its place. Something hard and clear. It wasn't anger. Anger is a hot, messy thing. This was cold. It was calm. It was a decision. My father was right. It was time to fix my own mistake. The mistake of letting myself become invisible. The mistake of trading my dignity for a quiet life. The quiet wasn't peace. It was silence. And I was done being silent. I walked over to my workbench. It was an old, heavy thing made of solid oak. My grandfather had built it. The surface was scarred with the marks of 100 different projects. It was a map of a useful life. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and a pen. The pen felt heavy and purposeful in my hand. At the top of the page, I wrote a single word. List. The next morning, I made my first phone call. Not to my son, but to a man named Mr. Henderson, a lawyer. He handled my will after Eleanor passed. A quiet, no-nonsense man who wore suits that were always perfectly pressed. His secretary put me through immediately. "Arthur," he said, his voice calm and professional. "Good to hear from you. I hope you're well." "I'm well, Jim," I said. "I need to make some changes. Substantial ones." There was a brief pause. "Of course. What would be a good time to come in?" "How about this morning?" Another pause, this one shorter. "I have an opening at 11. Will that work?" "I'll be there," I said, and hung up. Next, I went to my desk. I pulled out the file with all my financial information. Bank statements, investment portfolios, the deed to the house. I had set up Mark as a joint owner on my main checking account years ago. "Just in case," Daddy'd said, "so I can help you pay bills if you ever need it." I had never needed it. I had always paid my own bills. but it had seemed like a sensible thing to do at the time, a responsible act of planning. Now I saw it for what it was, a transfer of control, a key to my life that I had handed over willingly. I drove to the bank. The branch manager, a young woman named Sarah, greeted me with a polite smile. I had been banking there since it was a small local institution with one teller. Now, it was a massive corporation with glass walls and uncomfortable modern chairs. I sat down across from her desk. "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said. I slid the account number across the desk. "Certainly, Mr. Miller. What did you have in mind?" "I want to remove the joint owner from this account." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She typed something into her computer. "That would be your son, Mark Miller?" "That's correct. And you'd like to open a new account in your name only and transfer the balance?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Exactly." She pushed a few forms toward me. "I just need your signature here." And here, my hand was steady as I signed. The penmanship wasn't as elegant as it once was, but it was firm, legible. The signature of a man who knew what he was doing. It took 10 minutes. When I walked out of the bank, the sun felt warmer. The air seemed cleaner. I had taken back a key. My meeting with Jim Henderson was in a quiet, wood-paneled office that smelled of old books and leather. He listened patiently as I laid it all out, not with emotion, but with facts, the assumptions, the slow erosion of my autonomy. The garage. He didn't interrupt. He just made notes on a yellow legal pad, his fountain pen scratching softly on the paper. When I finished, he looked at me over the top of his glasses. "So, to be clear, Arthur, you want to revoke Mark's power of attorney, both financial and medical, correct, and you want to amend your will. I want to rewrite it." From scratch, he nodded slowly. "The house, the investments. Everything currently goes to Mark, with a trust for your granddaughter, Chloe, to be managed by him. That is no longer acceptable," I said. "Chloe, my granddaughter. She was a good kid, a quiet girl with old eyes. She came to visit on her own sometimes, not as part of a scheduled family event. She'd sit with me in the garage and ask about the cars. She didn't see them as assets. She saw the stories in them. She saw me. What do you want to do instead?" Henderson asked. "I'm not sure yet," I said honestly, "but I know what I don't want. I don't want my life's work to become a home gym." He allowed himself a small, dry smile. "A reasonable position." He capped his pen. "I'll draw up the revocation documents immediately. We'll need to file them. As for the will, take your time. Think about what you want your legacy to be, not what others expect it to be legacy." The word hung in the air. For years, I thought my legacy was my son, the house, the money I'd saved. Now I realize the legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's how you live until the very end. I spent the afternoon back in the garage, not sitting, not reminiscing, working. I opened my largest toolbox, the big red one on wheels. Inside, every tool had its place, nestled in foam cutouts I'd made myself. Decades of acquisition and care. There was a set of socket wrenches I'd intended to give Mark, a torque wrench for Chloe, who was studying engineering. I took them out one by one. I wiped each one down with an oiled rag, even though they were already clean. The familiar weight in my hands was comforting, solid, real. I wasn't just wiping down tools. I was taking inventory of my life. I was reclaiming my possessions. I put on a radio. An old Creedence Clearwater Revival song came on. I hummed along as I worked. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt methodical. The first text from Mark came that evening. "Try to pay a bill online. Account access denied. Is something wrong with the bank?" I read the message. I saw the lack of a question mark at the end. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation disguised as concern. I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. The small act felt like a closing door. A quiet, final click. An hour later, the phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was clipped, annoyed. "Dad, call me. The bank is saying you changed the account. I don't understand what's going on. Call me back." He didn't understand. That was the truest thing he'd said all day. He had no frame of reference for this. For me, acting without his input, without his permission. To him, it was a system error, a glitch in the matrix of his well-ordered life. I deleted the voicemail. The silence that followed was peaceful. The next day, Jessica called. Her tone was completely different. Sweet, concerned, dripping with counterfeit sympathy. Arthur, it's Jessica. We're so worried. Mark said there was some trouble at the bank, and you're not answering his calls. Is everything all right? Are you feeling okay? Are you feeling okay? The subtext was clear. Are you confused? Are you senile? Did you do something you didn't understand? I'm fine, Jessica, I said, my voice even. Oh, good. We were just so worried. So what happened at the bank? Mark thinks there must have been some kind of fraud alert. He wants to go down there with you tomorrow and get it all sorted out, Put things back the way they were. Restore his access. Restore his control. That won't be necessary, I said. There was no mistake. There was a long silence on her end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the sweet concern curdling into frustration. What do you mean, Arthur? I mean, I made a change to my account. It is now my name only, as it should be, but what? The word was a squeak of disbelief. Mark handles all that for you. It's so much easier. Easier for whom? I thought. I've decided I'm capable of managing my own affairs, I said. Thank you for your concern. And then I did something I had never done before in my life. I hung up on her. Mid-sentence, I placed the phone back in its cradle. My heart was beating a little faster, but my hand was rock steady. It felt like I had just taken a deep breath after holding it for 20 years. That weekend, my granddaughter Chloe came by. She didn't call first. She just appeared on the doorstep, holding a small box of donuts from the good bakery downtown. Hey, Grandpa, she said, her smile genuine. Thought you might like some company. She was the only one who still called me Grandpa. To Mark and Jessica, I was Dad or Arthur role. A name. To Chloe, I was family. Come on in, kid, I said, holding the door open. We sat at the kitchen table. She didn't mention her parents. She didn't ask about the bank. She asked about me. We talked for an hour about her classes, about a boy she liked, about a problem she was having with the thermodynamics equation. Finally, she looked at me, her expression serious. Mom and Dad are freaking out, she said quietly. I nodded. I imagine they are. They think you're not well. They're talking about getting doctors involved. I felt a cold knot in my stomach, but I kept my face impassive. And what do you think, Chloe? She looked at me, her gaze direct and clear. I think you seem more well than I've seen you in years. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back. It was the first time someone had seen the action for what it was. Not rebellion. Not confusion. Reclamation. They don't get it, do they? She said. The garage, no, kid. They don't. They never listen, she said, more to herself than to me. They just talk. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then I said, come with me. I want to show you something. I led her out to the garage. I turned on the lights and pulled the covers completely off all three vehicles. They sat there gleaming under the fluorescent lights, monuments of steel and glass and memory. Chloe walked around them, her eyes wide. She ran her hand gently along the flank of the Mustang. Grandma Eleanor loved this one, right? More than anything, I said, except maybe me and your dad. On a good day, she laughed, a real, warm sound that filled the cavernous space. What are you going to do, Grandpa? She asked, her voice soft. I looked at the cars. I looked at my workbench. I looked at this space that Mark and Jessica saw as nothing more than square footage for their exercise equipment. I'm going to make a change, I said. A big one. The following Monday, I started making more calls. I didn't call a real estate agent. I didn't call a retirement community. I called a man named Walt down at the VFW post. Walt used to be a professional auctioneer before he retired. Walt, I said, it's Arthur Miller, Artie, my boy. How the hell are you? Haven't seen you at poker night in a month of Sundays. I'm good, Walt. Listen, I have a question for you. A professional 1-inch, I told him about the cars. He whistled long and low into the phone. A 57 Bel Air convertible, you say? All original parts? Lord have mercy, Artie. That's a unicorn. I have 3 unicorns, Walt. And I need to find them a new home. He came over the next day. He walked through my garage like a priest entering a cathedral. He didn't touch anything at first. He just looked, his expression a mixture of reverence and professional appraisal. He ran his hand over the Ford's worn steering wheel. He checked the engine numbers on the Mustang. He spent half an hour just admiring the chrome on the Bel Air. Arthur, he said, finally turning to me, his eyes shining. This isn't a collection. This is a legacy. There was that word again. Legacy. I want to auction them, I said. All of them. Walt looked at me, searching my face. You sure about this? These cars are part of you. They are. I agreed. And that's why they can't stay here. They need to be with people who will see them, who will appreciate them. Not as obstacles, but as what they are. He understood. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough life to read between the lines. It would have to be a specialty auction, he said, his mind already working. For collectors. We get top dollar. Serious money. Artie, the money isn't the point, I said. The point is the action, he nodded. All right, I'll make some calls. I know the right people for the next 2 weeks. My garage was a hive of activity. Walt brought in photographers, appraisers, mechanics to verify the condition of the engines. They treated the cars with a respect that bordered on worship. They spoke in hushed tones. They saw the value, not just the monetary value, but the history. During this time, the calls from Mark and Jessica became more frantic. They left messages that swung wildly between anger and wounded self-pity. Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. Locking us out. What are we supposed to think? Arthur, this is Jessica. Your son is very hurt. We're your family. You're supposed to be able to rely on us, and we're supposed to be able to rely on you. This is manipulative. The word struck me. They saw my boundary as a tactic, my self-preservation as an attack on them. Their lack of insight was staggering. It was the final nail in the coffin of my doubt. It confirmed everything. I was making the right decision. I instructed my lawyer to send them the official revocation of the power of attorney via certified mail. I didn't want any ambiguity. I wanted a signature on a piece of paper that proved they had received it, that they knew. The auction was set for a Saturday. Walt had arranged for it to be held at a large exhibition hall downtown. He had advertised it in national classic car magazines. The interest, he told me, was overwhelming. I didn't go. I didn't want to see them go. My goodbyes had already been made in the quiet of my garage over the preceding weeks. I had sat in each car one last time. I ran my hands over the dashboards. I breathed in the smell of the interiors. I thanked them for the journeys. On the day of the auction, I stayed home. Chloe came over. She brought a deck of cards. Thought you could teach me how to play cribbage, she said. So we sat at the kitchen table, and I taught her the game my own father had taught me. 15-2, 15-4, and a pair is 6. We played for hours. The sound of the cards shuffling, the pegs moving along the board, filled the house. It was a good sound, a sound of connection. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Walt. Well, Arthur, he said, his voice crackling with excitement. You're not going to believe these numbers. He read them off to me, one by one. The final prices for the Bel Air, the Mustang, the Ford. The numbers were astronomical. Far more than I had ever imagined. It was, as Walt had said, serious money. I thanked him. I told him I owed him a great debt. Nonsense, he said. It was an honor, Artie. An absolute honor. After I hung up, Chloe looked at me. Are you sad, Grandpa? I considered the question. No, I said, and I was surprised to find it was the truth. I feel light. The memories are still mine. They were never in the cars. They were in here. I tapped my temple. The cars were just the vessels. And now they're gone. The garage is empty. What are you going to do with the money? She asked, her curiosity pure, without a hint of greed. I have an idea about that, I said. The next week was spent on the phone with Jim Henderson and my financial advisor. We set up a trust. A significant portion was placed in a fund for Chloe's education and future. The instructions were clear. She would get full control on her 25th birthday, with no one else having access. The rest of it, the lion's share, went somewhere else. I had Henderson draw up a cashier's check. A very, very large one. It was made out to the National Veterans Foundation, an organization that helps soldiers returning from combat, soldiers with wounds you couldn't see, soldiers like I had been a lifetime ago. I mailed the check myself. I put it in a blue box on the corner. The thud it made as it dropped inside was immensely satisfying. It was the sound of a legacy changing course. It took another week for Mark to show up. I knew he would. The news of the auction would have reached him eventually. The sums were too large to stay quiet for long. He didn't knock. He used his key, a key I had forgotten he still had. He walked into the kitchen where I was reading the morning paper. He looked terrible. His face was pale. His eyes were red-rimmed. He was holding a piece of mail, the certified letter from my lawyer. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking with a rage he was trying to control. "What have you done?" I folded my newspaper neatly and set on the table. I took a sip of my coffee. "I made some changes," I said calmly. "Changes? You sold the cars. You sold my inheritance." My inheritance. There it was. The truth, stripped bare of all pretense. He didn't mourn the loss of the cars. He mourned the loss of their cash value. "They were my cars, Mark," I said. "Bought with my money. Restored with my hands." "They were never yours, and the money," he demanded, his voice rising. "Where is the money? People are saying it was over $1 million. Where is it?" "It's been taken care of." "What does that mean? Taken care of? Did you hide it? Is this some kind of game? A punishment because we wanted to use the garage?" I looked at my son, my only child, and I felt a profound sense of pity. He was completely blind. He couldn't see past the dollar signs. He couldn't comprehend that an action could be motivated by something other than greed or spite. "It wasn't a punishment, Mark. It was a choice." "My choice, but why?" he yelled, finally losing control. "Why would you do this to your family? You stopped being family a long time ago," I said, the words quiet but firm. "Family doesn't see a father as a landlord. Family doesn't see a lifetime of passion as junk collecting dust. Family doesn't talk about whether a man should still be alive when they think he can't hear them." Ah, yes. I hadn't forgotten that. A few years back, during a summer barbecue, I had been in the house getting more ice. I'd heard them talking in the kitchen through the open window. Jessica's voice, sharp and clear. "He's getting so slow. It takes him forever to do anything." And Mark's reply, meant to be a joke, but full of a chilling truth. "At this point, it's just a waiting game," he had laughed. A short, sharp sound. I never told them I heard. I just carried the ice out, my heart a cold, heavy lump in my chest. I buried the memory deep, but it never went away. It was always there, a splinter under the skin. The color drained from Mark's face. He remembered. I didn't mean that," he stammered. "That was just—" "We were joking. I didn't hear anyone laughing but you," I said. "The money from the cars, the bulk of it, has been donated to a charity for veterans." He stared at me, his mouth agape. It looked like I had physically struck him. The concept was so alien to him. He couldn't process it. "Giving it away. You gave it away?" he whispered. "Yes, all of it. Most of it. Chloe is taken care of. The rest is gone." He sank into a kitchen chair, his body deflating. He ran his hands through his hair. He looked lost. A child who had just been told the fairy tale wasn't real. "I don't understand you," he said, his voice hollow. "I know," I replied. "That's the problem. It always has been." I stood up from the table. "I need you to leave your key," I said. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Dad, the key, Mark." He slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out the key to the house he grew up in, and placed it on the table. It made a small metallic sound. "I'll be changing the locks tomorrow anyway," I said. "This is just a formality." I walked him to the door. He didn't look at me. He just walked out, his shoulders slumped. I didn't slam the door behind him. I closed it gently. I turned the deadbolt. The sound was solid. Final. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the key. It was still warm for his pocket. I walked to the back door and threw it out into the yard. I would pick it up later when I mowed the lawn. The next morning, a locksmith came. A young man with tattoos up his arms. He was efficient and polite. He replaced every lock on every door. He handed me a set of new keys. They felt light in my hand. They felt like my own. I spent the afternoon in the garage. It was vast now, empty. The concrete floor was stained with the ghosts of oil drips and tire marks. The air still held a faint scent of gasoline and leather, but it was fading. It wasn't sad. It was clean. It was a blank slate. I swept the floor. I wiped down the walls. I organized my toolboxes. I set up a new, smaller workbench in the corner. I had plans. I wanted to take up woodworking again. Not big projects. Small things. Birdhouses. A jewelry box for Chloe. Things made for the joy of making them, not for their future value. My new life began. It was a quiet life. A simple one. I woke up when I wanted to. I drank my coffee and read the whole newspaper, not just the headlines. I worked in my new workshop. I listened to the radio. I took walks. I went to poker night at the VFW. I had lunch with Walt at the diner once a week. Chloe came for dinner every Sunday. We didn't have pot roast and mashed potatoes. We grilled burgers in the backyard, where I taught her how to make my wife's spaghetti sauce. The good tablecloth stayed in the sideboard. I was not lonely. I had been lonelier at a dining room table surrounded by people who did not see me. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Solitude is a choice. It is a space you create for yourself. Loneliness is a space others create for you by their absence of care. A month after the confrontation, a letter arrived. It was from Mark. His handwriting was shaky, the penmanship of a man humbled. It was a long letter, full of words like sorry and regret, and I didn't understand. He wrote about his memories of the garage, of me teaching him how to change the oil on the Ford. He said he had taken it all for granted. He asked if he could see me, if we could talk. I read the letter twice. I folded it and put on the mantelpiece next to a picture of Eleanor. I didn't reply. Not yet. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be earned back in a single letter. It has to be built slowly, carefully on a new foundation. A foundation of respect. The door to that was not closed, but it was no longer wide open. He would have to knock, and he would have to wait, and he would have to understand that I was the one who would decide whether to open it. This morning, I was out in the garage, sanding a piece of pine for a new birdhouse. The sun streamed in through the window. The smell of sawdust filled the air. It was a good smell, the smell of a new beginning. My life is smaller now. It is also infinitely larger. I am no longer the caretaker of a museum of my past. I am the architect of my present. My name is Arthur Miller. I am 81 years old, and for the first time in a very long time, I am living in my own home. I am the master of my own space. My legacy is not a house, or a car collection, or a bank account. My legacy is this quiet dignity, this hard-won peace, and it is not for sale. It cannot be inherited. It can only be lived, one quiet, deliberate day at a time. The clock on the wall still ticks, but I no longer count the seconds. I make the seconds count.